I understand one of the solutions to massive pretrial publicity is a change of venue. There are two cases I want to cite to the court, both of the United States Supreme Court cases. Murphy versus Florida, and the cited, I'm sorry, in Shepard versus Maxwell. There are two kinds of pretrial publicity that would indicate a continuance and or a change of venue required. Prejudice is presumed for pretrial publicity when pretrial publicity is sufficiently prejudicial and inflammatory, and the prejudicial pretrial publicity saturated the community where the trials were held. They found presumed pretrial publicity in a case much less renowned, much less publicized than this one. And Your Honor, to try this case in less than a year after the verdict came in the other case, don't we need to let it calm down a little bit? Where are you going to get a jury? Mars? I mean, you know they're in this state.
Allendale, Orangeburg, Beaufort, Colleton, Hampton.
I appreciate your sense of humor.
It's not a sense of humor. We have many counties where these indictments were issued. I am not presuming that a jury cannot be impaneled. Just as the trial that took place in Colleton County, there was no motion to change venue. And I'm not presuming any prejudice, and the test is not based on speculation. The test is whether or not a jury can be impaneled. You first have to attempt to get a jury according to the law.
What I'm saying is, I think it'd be an exercise of futility. I know this. We've been interviewing jurors, as you know, in the murder trial. There was a juror who on that jury who had been excused, been on the jury panel within the previous year, and told other jurors, I want on this trial, I want on this trial. And that, I'm afraid, is what happened on that jury. We got a motion for a new trial for after discovered evidence. The court, the Attorney General is going to file their response tomorrow. We believe the Court of Appeals will order a hearing before a circuit court judge to determine whether or not the corporate court tampered with that jury. And that is and so we would go forward with another trial while that matter is pending, while that matter is being litigated.
Probably not in Colleton County.
Well, Your Honor, the idea that somehow something happens in Colleton County doesn't affect what happens in Beaufort County. I mean, this is a national case.
What if I told you that before Alex Murdaugh became known as a convicted killer, he spent over a decade perfecting a different kind of crime? One that required no weapon, left no blood, but destroyed lives just as completely. This is the story of how a respected attorney weaponized the one thing that should never be broken: trust. And here's what makes it truly disturbing. The financial crimes weren't discovered because someone was watching. They were exposed because he finally ran out of victims to steal from. Before we dive deep into one of the most calculated fraud schemes in American legal history, I need you to do something. If you're interested in true crime that goes beyond the surface, that examines not just what happened, but how and why, then hit that subscribe button for Dark Trail Files. We don't just report the facts. We investigate the systems that allow these crimes to happen. Because understanding how Alex Murdaugh got away with stealing over $12 million for more than a decade isn't just about one man. It's about recognizing the warning signs that exist in every community. Now let's begin. By the time Alex Murdaugh stood before the court to face his financial crimes trial, something fundamental had shifted. He already knew he would spend the rest of his life in prison for taking the lives of his wife and son. The financial trial had become, in his mind, almost irrelevant, a formality, and you could see it in his demeanor. This moment reveals something chilling about human psychology. A man already sentenced to life hears he'll face another trial for stealing millions from vulnerable people, and this is his response.
Do they not have television in Allendale County?
I don't know.
Do they not have the internet?
I don't know.
What's the hurry? That's the other point. What is the hurry? He's pleading in federal court next Thursday. Every allegation the state has made The victims will have their day in court. Mr. Murdaugh indicated he pleaded guilty to the state charge, but the state insists on doing them in serial, so they get 3 convictions, so they get life without parole. A guy who's already serving 2 life sentences without parole. This is just another attempt to get more publicity, to make this another national case. And, Your Honor, I'm offended that the Attorney General he's got many other cases that are much older than this, but granted, Court TV won't be there for them. This is another effort in creating a national spectacle. Now, Your Honor has some things to say about Mr. Murdaugh at his sentencing. You obviously believe he's guilty of that. You obviously, and the jury found him guilty of that. But I would ask you to put those feelings aside and give us a chance to litigate this jury tampering issue. Allow Mr. Griffin and I to have time, if there's going to be a trial on these, prepare for those trials, which we won't put in our calendar for the fall. And third thing is, why doesn't the Attorney General put some distance between the conviction in the murder case and the trial, if there has to be a trial, on the financial cases?
That smile, that casual acknowledgement, it wasn't defiance. It was something worse. It was indifference. When you've already lost everything that matters to you, when the worst possible outcome has already occurred, what power does another courtroom hold? But here's what that smile obscures. The financial crimes weren't just side notes to a murder case. They were the foundation. They were the rot beneath the surface that eventually consumed everything. The financial trial wasn't about Alex Murdaugh anymore. It was about the people he destroyed. The clients who trusted him in their darkest moments. The families who believed he would protect their futures. The friends who never imagined he would steal from them. And as we'll see, his comfort in that courtroom stood in stark contrast to the pain of those who had to face him. Notice how relaxed he appears. This is a man pleading guilty to 22 federal charges, admitting to stealing millions of dollars, and yet there's no visible distress. Why? Because the stakes have already been decided.
Mr. Murdaugh, you've heard what Mr. Waters has stated. Do you agree with the statements he has made?
Yes, sir.
And do you wish to withdraw your formally entered plea of not guilty and plead guilty to each and every one of these charges?
I do.
You, your lawyer, and the prosecutor have negotiated a sentence in this matter that's been recited by Mr. Waters. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And where there's a negotiated sentence, either I will accept the guilty plea, and give you the exact sentence that you, your lawyer, and the prosecutor have negotiated, or I will not accept your guilty plea. Do you understand that?
I do, yes, sir.
And would you like for me to accept the guilty plea and impose the negotiated sentence?
Yes, sir, I would.
And because these cases, various counts are venued in various counties, Orangeburg County, Hampton County, Colleton County, Bamberg County, Allendale County, I think that in addition to Beaufort, do you wish to waive venue from those counties to have the case heard here in Beaufort?
I do.
Is there any question in your mind as to whether or not you wish to proceed with this guilty plea?
No, sir, there's no question in my mind.
Do you believe you've had enough time to think about it?
Yes, sir, I do.
Are
It's a long time to think about it.
I can imagine. Do you believe that you've had effective representation by Mr. Harpootlian and Mr. Griffin?
Absolutely.
Now, this plea agreement includes a provision providing for a waiver of appeal and waiver of filing any post-conviction relief, as well as ordering restitution. You have reviewed those provisions and are fully informed and agree with those provisions.
I am, yes, sir.
Under the Victim's Bill of Rights, the court must ensure that the Victim's Bill of Rights have been complied with. The state is well aware of that, as well as your lawyers. And the victims have the right to be heard prior to the official imposition of any sentence or the official acceptance of a guilty plea. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
And so it's the intent of the court, assuming a factual basis is established by Mr. Waters or Mr. James, that the court will accept this guilty plea contingent upon the Victim's Bill of Rights being satisfied. Therefore, any sentencing will take place at a subsequent hearing, which will be on November 28th at 10 o'clock. Do you understand that?
It'll be when, sir?
November 28th.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, Tuesday.
I'm sorry.
I understood it wouldn't be today. Yes, sir. I understand that.
All right. And understanding all that has been stated up to this point, how do you plead?
I plead guilty, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. You can be seated, and we'll hear from Mr. Waters.
This wasn't the performance of someone seeking mercy. This was damage control. He had already calculated that cooperation might result in concurrent sentences, meaning his financial crimes punishment would run alongside his life sentence for murder. In practical terms, it cost him nothing to admit the truth now. But understanding how he reached this point requires going back to the beginning, to the moment when Alex Murdaugh first realized that his name could be weaponized for profit. Alex Murdaugh didn't wake up one morning and decide to become a thief. He became one gradually, methodically, by recognizing something that most ethical attorneys never fully grasp. The legal system, particularly in small communities, runs on reputation and trust more than oversight and verification. And when your family name has represented justice for 3 generations, you don't just inherit a legacy. You inherit immunity from suspicion. For nearly 100 years, a member of the Murdaugh family served as the top prosecutor in South Carolina's 14th Circuit. That's not just a career. That's a dynasty. And Alex Murdaugh understood the power of that dynasty better than anyone. He understood that when he asked a paralegal to draft a check to a certain account, no one would question it. When he told a client their settlement needed to be structured a certain way, they would trust him. When he directed funds to a bank account that looked legitimate, no one would verify the details. The chief financial officer at Murdaugh's law firm describes the moment she began to suspect something was wrong. Her testimony reveals how Murdaugh exploited internal processes that were built on trust rather than verification.
Once the murders happened, it didn't seem right to be raising those issues with the defendant then, did it?
No, it didn't.
I'll lead the witness.
After the murders happened, did it seem right to you to raise those issues to the defendant?
No, as I stated earlier, we were concerned about the welfare of Alec and the feelings of himself. He was not at work, and we were trying to make sure that he was emotionally okay and able to deal with things before we pressured him about anything.
And then just a few weeks later, and still just in July, he's still in shock from all of these murders?
Yes,
And did ultimately you get an email from Chris Wilson?
I did on July 19th.
And what did that email say?
Chris said that he had the money in the trust available to us.
He's got the money, so no big deal, correct?
Correct?
Did you still, though, in the back of your mind, have some suspicions going back for a while?
I had suspicions that I didn't really believe that because I'd yet to see the ledger or the proof, and it seemed like there was no reason not to send that to me if something wasn't going on.
When ultimately you turn back to these issues and that Chris Wilson check was found, did that result in the uncovering of all of this?
It did.
Did that result in him losing his job at the law firm?
It did.
Where his family name had been a fixture there for decades.
Correct.
Did that result in him losing his license to practice law?
It did.
And the defense asked you that. Did that result in him facing a ton of criminal charges based on all of that?
Yes.
All of that was on the cusp of being uncovered, was it not?
Yes.
Was that on the cusp of being uncovered?
Yes.
Question been answered. Any further exam?
Very briefly, Ms. Seconder, I mean, finding the Chris Wilson check was coincidental to your work on the forge account research, correct?
Yes, but as we uncovered the forge, we knew we had a problem.
I understand. And it was the forge issue that led to all of this.
It would have eventually been the issue if we'd requested Chris Wilson. Regrettably, that we did not in July, we would not have received the money because the money was not in there. We found that out later.
Well, we'll find out about that. But the Chris Wilson issue is a one-off compared to all these other transactions that you brought here today, right?
That's right.
All right, thank you.
You may step down.
Thank you.
Jean Seckinger's testimony illuminated how the scheme worked from the inside. She described a system where checks would be written based on Murdaugh's instructions, where disbursement sheets would be processed without secondary approval because they came from a partner in the firm. She explained how settlement money would flow through the firm's trust account in ways that appeared routine but were actually being diverted. And most damaging of all, she revealed the moment when she confronted Murdaugh about missing funds, asking him directly about fees that should have been paid to the firm but had mysteriously vanished. That confrontation happened on the morning of the day his wife and son were killed. One of Murdaugh's law partners takes the stand to explain how someone could steal from a firm for over a decade without being caught. His answer is both simple and devastating.
When I got out of court, I saw that I had missed communications from one of my partners, Mark Paul, and I called him, and he said, "We have a problem," and I was like, "What?" And he said, "You have to come now," and I said, "I'm just walking out of court. I need to go home and eat supper, and it's not on my way." And he didn't ever tell me what it was, but he said, "You have to come now." And I could tell the urgency, and so he told me where to meet him, and that would have been in Cummings, South Carolina, at my partner Danny Henderson's place, and which was not on my way home, but he was so insistent that I went there and met. When I got there, Danny and Mark were there waiting on me.
And ultimately, what was your discussion?
I was giving a folder that had paperwork in it, and that paperwork consisted of checks, both front and back, and I was asked to review them.
And were those the what's been called the fake forged checks?
I believe the fake forged checks, there was not all of them that Ms. Seconder went over, but I believe that there was, I could probably call the names of most of them that were there. I know it was Anderson, Bush, Moore. There was probably about 5 or 6 of them, and I believe they had a copy of the Ferris check there too.
Ferris check?
Yes, and I'd sat for a minute and reviewed it. I think Danny said, "You're going to need a drink." And so...
Did you have a drink?
Yeah, ultimately more than one.
And what happened after that?
Well, they didn't tell me what was in it. They let me review it on my own. And I immediately said, this is bad. And my words then were that we have to terminate Alec. He cannot no longer practice with us. And that was within, I don't know how many minutes, but it was not a long period of time, because the way Jeannie had it laid out, it was clear what had happened and that this money had been stolen.
Did any of the partners go to confront Alec with this information that had been uncovered?
Yes, there was a meeting the following morning at Lee's house. I did not attend. I did not need to attend. I was still getting ready for trial. I had already decided where this was going, and they met, and then we, Danny and Randy, Alec's brother, went and met with Alec.
And what was your understanding of what the defendant said as a result of that?
That he admitted and said that he knew he was going to get caught at some point in time, and admitted to them that he did it.
The firm trusted him. It's that basic. When you're a named partner in a firm your family founded, when you're the son and grandson of legendary prosecutors, when you're the person everyone assumes has the most to lose from impropriety, the assumption is that you're the last person who would steal. That assumption created a blind spot. And Murdaugh lived in that blind spot for years. But trust alone doesn't explain the mechanics of the theft. That required more specific knowledge. It required understanding exactly how personal injury settlements work, how money moves from insurance companies to law firms to clients, and wherein that process funds could be diverted without immediate detection. Perhaps no testimony reveals the calculated nature of these crimes more than this. A paralegal who worked directly with Murdaugh describes the specific lies and manipulations he used to move money out of client accounts and into his own pockets.
Moving into the latter part of 2020, did you have any particular issue arise with a disbursement to forge that caught your attention?
I did.
Tell me about that if you would.
I was currently working from home. I had surgery on Halloween of 2020, and I was working from home, hadn't come back yet. I was planning to come back to the office the following Monday, and on that day, I believe it was December 15th of 2020, I got a phone call from the accounts payable department. Nicole called me, and she's one of the ladies that cuts the checks and works for Jeannie Seconder, and she told me that she had just got a disbursement sheet over, that Christy had sent over a disbursement sheet in one of my files. It made no sense. She didn't understand it, and I was confused too, because I was like, why didn't he contact me to do my disbursement? Because I'm kind of protective over my files. If I've worked that file the whole time, I want to finish that file. I want to work the whole process of it. And actually, the disbursement part is my favorite part of the file, because I want to be able to have that, be there when that client gets their money and gets that closure that they deserve. So I thought it was very odd that Christy was drafting a disbursement in one of my files, and
This was the day you were off work.
that's correct. I was working from home, and I still could have been reached, but I wasn't until Nicole reached out to me and told me.
Keep going.
She told me, so I looked, she sends it to me by email or text, I can't remember, and I reviewed it, and it didn't make sense to me either. There was a line on it that said the attorney fees were going, or amount of it was going to Forge, and I didn't understand how that was happening, and I'd never seen him send attorney fees to forge before, and so I didn't know that that was even a possibility. And so I called the office, and Christy transferred me to Alec, and I spoke to him and asked him about it. And he said, why did Nicole call you? And I said, well, she doesn't know how to write these checks out because it doesn't make sense to her. She hasn't ever seen a disbursement like this. And he said, I'll take care of it. And so he said, I'll call Nicole, I'll take care of it. And so I remember talking to Nicole later and say, so what did he say? What was the reason behind it? And she said, he said that they can structure their attorney fees, and that's what that check was for.
The paralegal's testimony revealed a pattern. Murdaugh would instruct staff to draft checks to entities that sounded legitimate. He would create false documentation about settlement structures. He would claim certain expenses needed to be paid when those expenses didn't exist. He would tell clients their money was being placed in annuities or structured settlements for their protection, when in reality, their money was going directly to accounts he controlled. And because he was the attorney, because he was the one with the law degree and the family name and the authority, no one questioned these instructions. They assumed he knew what he was doing. And he did. He knew exactly what he was doing. The mechanics of the fraud centered on three main schemes. The first involved his relationship with Russell Lafitte, a banker at Palmetto State Bank. Murdaugh would arrange for Lafitte to be appointed as conservator or personal representative for clients who had received substantial settlements. Lafitte would then allow Murdaugh to access those funds inappropriately, writing checks that went to Murdaugh instead of the clients. The scheme generated hundreds of thousands of dollars in diverted funds. The second scheme was more audacious. In 2015, Murdaugh opened a bank account under the name that sounded like Forge, which was meant to mimic Forge Consulting, a legitimate company that handled structured settlements for law firms in South Carolina. He instructed paralegals to issue checks payable to this fake Forge account, claiming the money was for client annuities or settlement structures. Instead, every dollar went into an account where he was the sole owner and authorized signer. From 2017 through 2021, millions of dollars flowed through this fraudulent account. Clients had no idea their money had been stolen. The law firm had no idea the real Forge Consulting wasn't receiving these payments. And Murdaugh continued to present himself as a devoted advocate for injured people while systematically robbing them. The third scheme was perhaps the most personal and painful. It involved the estate of Gloria Satterfield, his family's housekeeper who died after a fall at his home. But before we examine that particular betrayal, we need to understand something crucial about who Murdaugh chose as his victims. Because that choice was not random. When you analyze Alex Murdaugh's financial crimes, a disturbing pattern emerges. He didn't steal from wealthy clients who could afford to lose money. He didn't target people with resources to fight back. He specifically victimized people who were in their most vulnerable moments. People who had been injured. People who had lost loved ones. People who were turning to a lawyer precisely because they had nowhere else to turn. One victim was involved in a serious car accident and sustained life-changing injuries. The settlement was supposed to provide for decades of medical care and lost income. Murdaugh stole a substantial portion. Another victim was a family who had lost someone they loved and were depending on a wrongful death settlement to survive financially. Murdaugh diverted those funds. Again and again, the pattern repeated. Catastrophic injury, devastating loss, desperate need, and Murdaugh saw opportunity. Tony Satterfield, son of Gloria Satterfield, addresses the court about what Alex Murdaugh stole from his family. This testimony goes beyond dollars. It's about trust destroyed in the moment of deepest grief.
Well, we saw just a moment ago a confession of judgment where Alex Murdaugh admitted that he owed you $3 million. Can I get this wrong? Where's the confession of judgment? There it is. $4,305,000. Is that right?
That's the judgment, yes.
Okay. But you hired a lawyer, Eric Bland, very fine lawyer, and he actually sued Mr. Murdaugh's firm and some other folks and got you $6.5 million, right?
Yes, or no, not that I'm aware of.
Pardon me?
Not that I'm aware of. The only thing I'm aware of is the judgment.
So Mr. Bland didn't tell you about the $6.5 million?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure history's not repeating itself here. And so you actually recovered $6.5 million, which would be a couple $1 million more than you would have gotten had you received the money that Alex took, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you've been made more than whole for that loss.
Yes.
$2 million more than you would have gotten had he not taken your money, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Now, sort of the last question that I think I have for you, but let me check with my co-counsel before. Well, one last question is this. On June 7th, prior to June 7th, prior to June 8th, had you ever threatened Alex Murdaugh with exposure?
All right, could you repeat the question again?
Prior to June 8th, 2021, did you ever threaten Alex Murdaugh saying, I know you stole my money, where's my money? You know, I know you got the money. Did you threaten him in any way?
No.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Gloria Satterfield worked for the Murdaugh family for more than 2 decades. She was described by her family as someone who loved Maggie and Alec and their sons. She wasn't just an employee. She was part of their lives. When she died after falling at the Murdaugh home in 2018, Alec approached her sons and told them he would help them. He told them to sue him so they could collect from his homeowner's insurance policy. He assured them he would make sure they were taken care of. He even recommended that his friend, attorney Corey Fleming, represent them in the case. What the Satterfield family didn't know was that this was all part of an elaborate fraud scheme. Murdaugh arranged for the insurance companies to pay out over $4 million. He then conspired with Fleming to divert that money. Checks were written payable to the fake Forge account. The Satterfield sons received nothing. They didn't even know a settlement had been reached until they learned about it through other sources and filed a lawsuit demanding answers. When the truth finally emerged, they discovered that the man they had trusted, the man their mother had worked for loyally, had stolen their entire settlement while pretending to help them. This is where the human cost of financial crime becomes undeniable. The Satterfield family speaks directly to Murdaugh about what his theft meant to them.
Your Honor, I do have one request. Do you mind if I face that way?
That'd be fine.
Because when I talk to people, I like facing who I'm talking to. Thank you. I really don't have words. You lied. You cheated. You stole. You betrayed me and my family and everybody else. And you did it at a cost of my mom's death, first of all. A couple Octobers ago, you wrote a half-hearted I'm sorry letter, which was half-hearted because your actions did not follow through that you were really sorry. So I'm going to read you. I have an apology. I'm sorry that you feel like you had to betray us, steal from us, cheat us, and lie to us. I'm sorry that your family has to now go through what they're going to have to go through the rest of their life because of your actions, of what you did. But I want you to know that I forgive you. I will pray for you every day, that God get the hold of your heart. And you may not know the gospel, so I'm going to share it with you. The gospel is the death, the burial, and resurrection of Jesus. That's how people are able to forgive people and able to do right and able to pray for those who hurt them and do things to them. So my heart is with you. My prayers are with you, and I just wish the best for you.
The impact statements from the Satterfield family cut through all the legal terminology and financial complexity to reveal what theft actually means. It means a family struggling to pay for their mother's funeral while the man responsible for her death hoarded the money meant to help them. It means years of wondering why the settlement was taking so long, why they couldn't get answers, why the lawyer who promised to help them had stopped returning calls. It means discovering that your grief was exploited for profit. And it means standing in a courtroom and looking at someone who destroyed your trust and demanding that they finally face consequences. But the Satterfield family wasn't alone. There were multiple victims, each with their own story of betrayal. Jordan Jenks, a longtime friend of Murdaugh's, was injured in a car crash and hired Alec to represent him. He was supposed to receive around $150,000 from his settlement. Instead, Murdaugh stole it. Now Jenks stands in court and asks a question many of us are thinking.
I've been waiting on this day to look in your eyes. I wanted to sit down with you one-on-one when I found out what you did. Just want to know why. I can say, oh, excuse me. Unlike a lot of these people here, these victims, I got a lot of intimate stuff that I can say. You remember all those wildlife hunts I had for law enforcement? Your entire family was a guest of honor. Mr. Buster, Judge Eldroff, insisted on me taking care of them for the day. You don't know how many brownie points you got in my life from just that. I trusted you with everything. I knew I was gonna break. I knew it.
Mr. Bland, can you reposition his mic so I can understand?
I knew I was gonna break. Excuse me, I knew I was gonna break. But I got some notes here I don't even know if I can go through. Our family got a deep relationship, man. You remember making a comment to me after I found out, after we discussed the possible amount this lawsuit was worth, and you made a comment to me, and you said, don't spend all this money foolishly. Tell me what you did with $20 million that you stole. Part of it being mine. And you know, I'm sitting there crying. I want everybody to know, Judge, I need you to know. I'm not crying because of what he stole from me. I'm crying for what he did to everybody in the suit. These kids, these people dying. I didn't want to come up here and bash you, but I gotta ask you, what kind of animal are you? I can't even go over my notes. I'm not here to be your judge. Ultimately, that belongs to the good Lord and Savior. But may He have mercy on your soul. I didn't want to see you. When I saw you on TV in an orange jumpsuit, it hurt me. Still wasn't mad at you. Was this judicial system put together a system to deal with people that make bad choices? And my friend, you chose to make the choice you made. So I need the judge to know that I am in full favor of the court's recommendation for the 27 years. I can go back to us going to mediation. That you affected my wife. You chose to have Maggie deal with us those 2 days we were in Charleston in mediation. She catered to us hand and foot. You told me where to go and check into my room. We did. From that point, we never drove another foot. Neither did you. Maggie drove us everywhere we went. When all this came about, Paul, and Maggie, I couldn't believe it. I didn't believe it. But after sitting here today and hearing some of the devious things that you did to people, these victims here, changed my mind, bro. Once again, I ask you, what kind of animal are you? Boy, I gave you my all. I would do, The money you stole from me, you could have asked me for it, and I would have gave it to you if that's how I felt about you and your family. You didn't have to steal it from me, man. And I still, if there's any way possible, you set it up for me to be on your visitation list. I want to sit down with you. I want to look you in your eyes and talk to you when I can really talk to you. We got some intimate things we can talk about.
I would like that.
But why, bro? Why? Such a talent. How talented you are? I don't understand. Mr. Harpoonian, nothing to do with you, but you made a comment earlier about the attorneys trying to sell bobbleheads and cups. Can you represent this man to sell those bobbleheads and cups to repay the victims that he stole from? Thank you.
What kind of animal are you? That's not legal language. That's not courtroom protocol. That's a man whose friendship was weaponized against him, demanding an answer that makes sense of the incomprehensible. How do you steal from someone who trusted you? How do you look a friend in the eye, shake their hand, attend their family events, and simultaneously rob them? Jinx testified that he didn't want to bash Murdaugh. He came to court to understand, and his pain represented every victim who had believed Alex Murdaugh was on their side. The theft from injured clients wasn't opportunistic. It was systematic. Murdaugh would review incoming cases and identify clients with large settlements who were in positions where they would be less likely to scrutinize every detail. Clients who were physically incapacitated. Clients who were grieving. Clients who didn't have sophisticated financial knowledge. He would then structure the settlement in ways that allowed him to divert funds, often claiming he was protecting their money through special accounts or annuities. In reality, he was stealing it. The question many people ask is why? Why would someone with a successful law practice, with a famous family name, with seemingly everything going for him, choose to steal from the most vulnerable people in society? The answer lies in understanding not just the crimes themselves, but the addiction that Murdaugh claims fueled them. But we need to be careful here, because addiction can explain some behaviors without excusing the calculated, sophisticated nature of these particular crimes. There's a particular kind of discomfort that happens when someone who has perfected the art of lying is suddenly confronted with undeniable truth. You can see the mechanisms of deception grinding to a halt. The smooth explanations become hesitant. The confident demeanor cracks. And in Alex Murdaugh's case, these moments of confrontation revealed just how much of his life had been performance. Prosecutor Creighton Waters methodically dismantles Murdaugh's attempts to minimize or explain away his thefts. Watch how Murdaugh's responses shift as he's confronted with the specific details of each victim he betrayed.
It wouldn't be unusual for me to look them in the eye.
While you were doing some fast talking to a teenager, correct?
I certainly was not telling her the truth. I don't know if I was talking fast or slow, but I wasn't telling the truth.
All right. Well, you ultimately convinced her that there was nothing amiss here, right? While you were stealing her money, correct?
I don't know if I convinced her that nothing was amiss or I misled her, but I admit candidly in all of these cases, Mr. Waters, that I took money that was not mine and I shouldn't have done it. I hate the fact that I did it. I'm embarrassed by it. I'm embarrassed for my son. I'm embarrassed for my family. And I don't dispute that I did it. I
understand that. But you understand that we have to ask about these things because we've heard about it in a very academic paperwork manner, but every single one of these, you had to sit down and look somebody in the eye and convince them that you were on their side when you were not, correct? That's what you did in every single one of these.
I mean, every time...
Answer my question, yes or no, and then you can explain. I'll let you explain all day long.
Well, I mean, no, sir, that may or may not be true.
Okay.
And Mr. Waters, just to try to get through this quicker, I admit...
I know you want to get through it quicker, but we're not. So answer the question, please.
What I admit is that I misled them, I did wrong, and that I stole their money. Now, this is something, what's the date on that one?
Cross-examination is an art form, and Waters demonstrated mastery. He didn't allow Murdaugh to hide behind generalities or vague admissions of wrongdoing. He went case by case, client by client, forcing Murdaugh to acknowledge specifically what he had done. He made Murdaugh state, on the record, that he had stolen from a particular person's settlement, that he had created false documents, that he had lied to his law firm, that he had manipulated people who were injured or grieving. Each admission built on the last, creating an undeniable portrait of systematic, calculated theft. What made the cross-examination particularly effective was Waters' focus on the deliberate nature of the crimes. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This wasn't someone in crisis making a desperate decision. This was more than a decade of sophisticated fraud that required planning, manipulation, false documentation, and constant lies to maintain. Waters highlighted how Murdaugh would have to wake up every morning and choose to continue the deception. How he would sit across from clients, look them in the eye, and steal from them while pretending to help them. How he would participate in firm meetings knowing he was secretly robbing his partners. The cross-examination stripped away any possibility that these were crimes of impulse or desperation. They were crimes of choice. But some of the most powerful confrontation moments came not from the prosecutor, but from the people Murdaugh had known personally. People who thought they understood who he was. Chris Wilson and Alex Murdaugh were best friends. They went to law school together. They worked on cases together. They trusted each other completely. And Murdaugh stole from him too. Wilson's testimony reveals what it means to discover that your closest friend has been lying to you for years.
First of all, though, just very quickly, you're a lawyer, is that correct?
I am, since 1998.
1998, and describe very quickly your practice for the record.
Actually, since 1995. I've had my own practice since 1998. In the last 15 years, I've done primarily personal injury work, automobile accidents, people that are injured at work. I'll practice type cases, those things.
And where do you normally practice? Where's your home base?
My only office is in Bamberg.
Do a lot of plaintiff's work?
That's all I do anymore. For the last 15 years, that's really all I do.
And do you know the defendant?
I do.
And when did you get to know the defendant?
I've known Alex since we were in high school. Bamberg and Hampton. I grew up in Bamberg, and they're only about 30 miles apart. And so I knew of Alex and had been around him some growing up. We had some mutual friends. I was a lot closer to some other guys in Hampton that I grew up playing golf and things like that with, but I would cross paths with Alex. Played on the same baseball team one summer, I think like our senior years in high school or somewhere around high school age. Didn't really keep in touch with him or cross paths with him until we ended up going to law school, and we started law school together at Carolina. 3 years there together at law school and lived together part of the time.
Did y'all become friends?
We did.
Become close friends?
Very close.
Best friends?
He was one of my best friends, yes. And I thought, he was, and I thought he felt the same way about me.
You feel that way now?
I don't know how I feel now, Mr. Waters.
Fair enough.
Wilson described lending Murdaugh money when he claimed to be in financial trouble. He described working on a case together where they won a substantial settlement. And he described how Murdaugh convinced him to write the check for the law firm's portion of the fees directly to Murdaugh instead of to the firm. At the time, Wilson didn't question it. Why would he? This was his best friend, his law school buddy, someone he trusted implicitly. Only later did Wilson discover that Murdaugh had stolen the firm's money, that his claim of needing help was part of a larger pattern of theft, and that their friendship had been exploited for financial gain. This moment has been analyzed extensively. Is Murdaugh crying because of genuine remorse? Or because he's watching one of the few people who still believed in him describe how he was betrayed?
I was asleep. My phone's always kind of sit beside the bed. I could hear it buzzing, but I really wasn't paying any attention. My wife comes in kind of, just hysterical. She says, you gotta wake up. And I don't remember if she was on the phone with Randy's wife or Randy himself. She's trying to tell me what's going on, and I'm looking at my phone, and I've got a text from a person I knew in Hampton that's texting me saying, "Hey, give me a call. I got to tell you something before you hear it somewhere else." It was a person that was in the county government down there that I knew that was just trying to get word to me before I heard it somewhere else. My wife, I don't think I respond to that person or her text immediately. My wife is telling me what's going on. I just told her, I said, I'll get some clothes. I got to go to Moselle. We started trying to call our daughter right at about 11 o'clock. Started trying to call our children, tell them what was going on. I don't even know how much my wife and I spoke about it. I mean, she knew I was leaving. I got in the car, went straight to Moselle, grabbed some clothes and went straight to Moselle.
So how long does that take?
From Columbia, about an hour and 40 minutes or so. I mean, I called some different people on the way that I thought needed to know. I mean, repeatedly tried to call my daughter. She was extremely close. She is and was extremely close to Buster and Paul. And, we couldn't get her to answer, called her boyfriend, just repeatedly calling her.
Murdaugh's visible emotion during Wilson's testimony stands in sharp contrast to his relatively composed demeanor during much of the financial crimes proceedings. Some interpreted his tears as finally recognizing the full scope of damage he caused. Others saw it as grief for his own circumstances rather than empathy for his victims. What's clear is that Wilson's testimony represented something different than the other witnesses. Wilson wasn't just a victim. He was someone who had genuinely loved Alex Murdaugh, who had considered him family, and who now had to accept that the person he thought he knew had never really existed. One of the most painful aspects of Alex Murdaugh's crimes is that they weren't limited to clients and strangers. He stole from his law firm. He manipulated friends. He deceived his own family. And the testimony from people who were closest to him revealed layers of betrayal that went beyond financial theft. Murdaugh's brother describes a deeply personal moment, explaining the physical and psychological state Alex was in as the walls closed in around him. This testimony provides context for understanding how someone maintains such elaborate lies while spiraling internally.
Can you describe for the jury Alex's condition, like physical condition in the car?
Yes, sir. So when I met Randy over in Savannah, he had Alec, and I got in the car or Randy's truck with him. I'd never seen anything like it. I've seen television shows of talking about the leg twitching and the squirminess, if you will, and that's the first thing I mean, you could just tell he was sweating. He was thrashing about. Jim,
Did he turn
I don't know
around?
how much detail you want me to go into.
What, did he turn around on the seat of the car? What was he doing?
Yeah, so maybe halfway there, at one point, he had taken his seatbelt off and he had his head down where your fanny would be in the seat and is trying to stretch his legs and just kind of steady, just like thrashing them and kicking them. It's just, again, I've seen TV, but I've never seen something like this in real life.
And was he able to control himself?
No, sir. I said about detail. So he messed himself. He had diarrhea. He just couldn't control it.
And then...
and I say diarrhea, I'm not talking about at a restroom. I'm talking about in the car, in his pants.
The testimony from Murdaugh's brother showed a man in crisis. Someone who had spent years maintaining a facade of success and control while privately struggling with addiction and the growing impossibility of keeping his crimes hidden. His brother described Murdaugh's desperation, his erratic behavior, his attempts to self-medicate. But even in these descriptions of genuine struggle, there's an uncomfortable question. When did the addiction begin? When did the stealing begin? And how much of one was used to justify the other? It's impossible to separate Murdaugh's opioid addiction from his financial crimes entirely. By his own admission, he was spending significant amounts of money on pills. Some estimates suggested he was spending thousands of dollars per week to fuel his addiction. But here's where the chronology matters. Prosecutors established that Murdaugh's financial crimes began as early as 2011. His heavy opioid use is generally believed to have escalated significantly later, which means for years, he was stealing before the addiction could be used as any kind of explanation. He was stealing when he was functioning as a successful attorney. He was stealing when his life appeared from the outside to be perfect. The addiction may have accelerated the crimes. It may have created additional financial pressure, but it didn't create the willingness to deceive and steal. That existed first. This statement reveals something important about how Murdaugh understood his own addiction. Rather than describing pills as something that impaired him, he described them as something that enabled him to function.
If I took 30, if I had 30 milligram pills, you figure 100 pills would be 3,000 milligrams.
100?
100.
So you're taking 60 a day or something like that?
There were days where I took more than that. There were days I took less than that.
And how would you take them during the course of the day? I mean, how many are you taking at one time? How frequent in this time period, let's say January to June?
You know, there's a point in time, and I'm not sure when it was, I think it was well before that, where, and you have to understand this, this is something that I can still remember the first time I ever took an OxyContin.
Murdaugh, can I ask you to answer my question, and I'll let you explain all you want. And my question was, how many were you taking a day during this time from January to June? Answer that first, please, and if you want to explain, I'm happy to let you do so.
I'm not positive, and here's why. It's because over the years, like as I was saying, the first OxyContin, one OxyContin made me sick. And that was when I was transitioning from hydrocodone to oxycodone. And it made me sick because it was a really strong one. And so, you know, one OxyContin pill was like 10 hydrocodone pills. So, but anyway, as I took more and more, and over the years, it just, you know, you build up a tolerance to pain pills. And so what might give me this energy, one of the reasons I became so addicted is, you know, some people talk about pain pills and how they make them lethargic and, you know, where they can't do anything and they feel. Opiates gave me energy. I mean, whatever I was doing, it made it more interesting. You know, it made me want to do it longer. You know, to go on a drive, it made driving. It just at the beginning, it made everything better.
Murdaugh's claim that opiates gave him energy rather than sedating him has been met with skepticism from addiction specialists. Most opioid users describe the drugs as providing relief from pain or creating a sense of calm or euphoria, not as stimulants. Murdaugh's description suggested he was using opioids to manage not just physical pain, but the psychological stress of maintaining his crimes. The pills allowed him to continue performing as the successful attorney, the devoted family man, the pillar of the community, even as he was systematically destroying all of those roles through his actions. But testimony about his drug use also raised uncomfortable questions about accountability. At what point does addiction stop being an explanation and become an excuse? When someone makes deliberate choices to create false documents, to lie to clients, to manipulate friends, to sustain elaborate schemes over years, how much of that could be attributed to impaired judgment versus conscious choice? Throughout his legal proceedings, Alex Murdaugh consistently pointed to his opioid addiction as a central factor in his crimes. He described spending massive amounts of money on pills. He described his judgment being clouded. He described making decisions he never would have made if he had been sober. And there's no question that opioid addiction is a devastating disease that impairs decision-making and creates desperate situations. The question is whether that reality excuses or even explains the specific nature of Murdaugh's financial crimes. At his sentencing, Murdaugh was given the opportunity to address his victims directly. His words reveal his attempt to frame the crimes through the lens of addiction while also accepting responsibility.
Last thing I want to say, Your Honor, is that I am fully committed to trying to be a better person. I'm going to do as much good as possible and help as many people as I can while I'm incarcerated. I remain fully and wholeheartedly committed to finding a way to somehow make those who love me proud again in some small way.
Murdaugh's statement to his victims was carefully constructed. He expressed remorse. He acknowledged the pain he caused. He described his shame and his commitment to sobriety. But he also consistently returned to the theme of addiction, suggesting that the person who committed these crimes was not his authentic self, but rather someone controlled by drugs. This narrative serves a psychological purpose. It allows Murdaugh to separate his identity from his actions. The real Alex Murdaugh in this framing is the sober man standing before the court expressing regret. The person who stole millions of dollars was a different version of himself, one created by addiction. But prosecutors and victims challenged this narrative by pointing to the sophisticated nature of the crimes. Creating a fake bank account requires planning. Maintaining false documentation over years requires organization. Lying consistently to dozens of people requires calculation. These aren't the hallmarks of impaired judgment. They're the hallmarks of deliberate fraud. A person in the grip of addiction might steal money impulsively. They might forge a check in a moment of desperation. But creating multiple intricate schemes, each with its own mechanisms and victims, suggests cognitive function that goes beyond what addiction alone can explain. The addiction defense also struggles with the question of when the stealing started and when it stopped. If addiction was truly the driving force, you would expect the crimes to begin when the addiction was at its worst and to stop when treatment was sought. Instead, the financial crimes appear to have begun during a period when Murdaugh was still functioning successfully and continued right up until he was caught, not until he chose to stop. The pattern suggests that addiction may have been a factor, but it wasn't the primary cause. The primary cause was opportunity, rationalization, and the belief that he wouldn't be caught. Addiction specialists who have analyzed the case have noted that while opioid addiction absolutely affects judgment and creates financial pressures, the specific crimes Murdaugh committed required a level of executive function and forward planning that's inconsistent with someone whose mental faculties are significantly impaired by drug use. He was able to practice law successfully during this period. He was able to maintain relationships, manage complex legal cases, and present himself as competent and trustworthy. If he was capable of all of that, he was capable of making choices about stealing. None of this is to suggest that addiction isn't real or serious or that it didn't play any role in Murdaugh's actions. But it's important to distinguish between an explanation and an excuse. Addiction may explain some of the financial pressure Murdaugh felt. It may explain why he needed money desperately. But it doesn't explain why he chose to get that money by stealing from injured and grieving clients rather than seeking help, declaring bankruptcy, or making any number of other legal choices. Those choices weren't made by the addiction. They were made by Alex Murdaugh. At his sentencing for financial crimes, Alex Murdaugh was given the opportunity to address his victims. It's a standard part of criminal proceedings, meant to allow defendants to take responsibility and express remorse directly to those they've harmed. In Murdaugh's case, this moment was particularly significant because some of his victims were people he had known for years, people who had considered him a friend, people whose trust he had deliberately exploited. Murdaugh stands before the court and addresses the people he stole from. Watch his words, his tone, and consider what an apology means when it comes after the money is gone and cannot be recovered.
I appreciate each of you talking to me. I appreciate each of you looking at me while I'm talking to you. I can tell that you're listening, and I appreciate it. I'm going to say one more time, I hope you know, I hope you believe that it is heartfelt. And the two things that I hope you take away today are, number one, that I care about you, and number two, that I hate the things that I did, and I am so sorry. And Your Honor, I thank you for letting me address you and for letting me address the victims. Thank you so much.
Sir.
Murdaugh's apology followed a familiar pattern. He acknowledged his actions. He expressed shame. He described his commitment to making amends, even though he knows he can never truly repair the damage. He asked for forgiveness while acknowledging he doesn't deserve it. From a linguistic perspective, it hit all the expected notes. But the victim's responses made clear that words, no matter how carefully chosen, cannot undo the harm of systematic betrayal. The Satterfield family's response to Murdaugh's apology is raw and honest. They don't speak about legal abstractions. They speak about what it meant to be betrayed by someone their mother loved and trusted.
Gloria worked very hard for you for 20 years, you and your family. She loved Buster and Paul as her own. She loved Maggie, and she trusted and loved you wholeheartedly. She considered you and your family as her own family. To have her loyalty and love and trust betrayed by you is very hard for our family to understand. We just will never understand. And how you were able to profit from her death is especially hard for us to understand and cause unimaginable hurt to our family. The fact that if only you had given Tony and Brian just a very small portion of the money you stole from them, they would have appreciated it and been very happy while thinking that you had kept your word, done your legal duty, and looked out for them and their best interest. Instead, you chose to break the law that you had sworn to uphold, be greedy, and look out for your own best interest. Alec, in time, the wrong you did to so many people may be forgotten, but in hopes that Gloria and her pure heart, full of kindness and love, will not be forgotten, we started the Gloria's Gift Foundation in honor of Gloria and her memory by providing gifts to some needy children during Christmas so that Gloria will be remembered forever. And my heart goes out not only to my family, but today to hear all these families that you did wrong by. Those children that you stole from, everything. They lost a mother, and you stole every dime from them. I just don't understand. Did you not have a soul? I don't get it, Alec. I can't understand it. And I thank God maybe that I don't understand it, because then I might be in the same situation as you. I just don't get it, and I guess I never will get it. So hopefully God will forgive you, because you're going to need forgiveness. I just don't know. I'm lost for words, Alec. You are not the person that I thought I knew. And you come from a good family, but you wasted your life And I hate you did your family the way you did, because you do come from a good family. And I'm sorry you threw your life away. Thank you, Judge, for allowing me to address.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
And thank you for the state for everything y'all did for us to find justice.
That's on behalf of Satterfield.
Thank you.
The impact statements from victims revealed something that often gets lost in financial crime cases. These weren't just economic losses. They were violations of fundamental trust. When you hire an attorney to represent you after you've been injured, you're not just entering a business transaction. You're placing your most vulnerable self in someone else's hands. You're trusting them to protect you when you can't protect yourself. When that trust is betrayed, the psychological damage can be as significant as the financial damage. One victim described how Murdaugh's theft forced them to delay necessary medical treatment because they didn't have the settlement money they were owed. Another described the stress of wondering why their case was taking so long to resolve, never imagining their lawyer had already stolen their settlement. The Satterfield family described learning that the man their mother had worked for, the man they had trusted to help them after her death, had instead used their grief as an opportunity to steal millions of dollars. These aren't just stories about money. They're stories about how financial crime destroys the social fabric that holds communities together. The sentencing hearing also highlighted the practical reality that many of Murdaugh's victims will never be fully compensated for their losses. He was ordered to pay over $8 million in restitution, but he has no legitimate assets to pay it with. The money he stole was spent on drugs, on maintaining his lifestyle, on paying off earlier debts. It's gone, which means that for many victims, the apology and the prison sentence are all they'll ever receive. There will be no check in the mail restoring what was taken. There will be no return to the financial position they would have been in if the settlement had been paid as intended. They will have to rebuild with whatever resources they have left and with the knowledge that someone they trusted actively harmed them. This is why financial crime, particularly when committed by professionals in positions of trust, carries such significant penalties. It's not just about the money. It's about the erosion of the systems that allow society to function. When you can't trust your lawyer to handle your case honestly, when you can't trust your bank to protect your money, when you can't trust the institutions that are supposed to help you, everything becomes more difficult and more dangerous. Alex Murdaugh didn't just rob individuals. He damaged trust itself. The final question we need to address is the most uncomfortable one. How did Alex Murdaugh steal millions of dollars over more than a decade without being caught? The answer reveals systemic failures that go far beyond one man's criminal behavior. It reveals how power and reputation can create immunity from accountability until the immunity becomes unsustainable. The Murdaugh family name carried enormous weight in South Carolina's Lowcountry. For nearly a century, a member of the family had served as the top prosecutor. They weren't just lawyers. They were the embodiment of justice in that region. People didn't question a Murdaugh. You didn't doubt a Murdaugh's integrity. You didn't scrutinize a Murdaugh's decisions. And Alex Murdaugh weaponized that deference. When he instructed paralegals to write checks to accounts that looked legitimate, they wrote them. When he told clients their settlements needed to be structured in particular ways, they trusted him. When bank officials saw transactions from his accounts, they processed them without additional verification because he was Alex Murdaugh. His name was his credential, and that credential allowed him to bypass the normal safeguards that might have detected his crimes years earlier. But it wasn't just about his family name. It was also about the lack of internal controls at his law firm. By his own partner's admission, the firm operated on a model of trust rather than verification. Checks could be issued based on a partner's instructions without secondary approval. Settlement disbursements weren't routinely audited. Client communications weren't monitored. The assumption was that partners, particularly partners from the founding family, would act with integrity. That assumption created the opportunity for theft. Banking relationships also facilitated the crimes. Russell Lafitte, the banker who conspired with Murdaugh, was convicted for his role in allowing Murdaugh to access client funds inappropriately. But beyond that specific conspiracy, There were questions about how routine banking procedures failed to flag suspicious activity. Large checks being deposited into accounts that mimicked legitimate businesses but weren't actually those businesses. Unusual patterns of withdrawals and transfers. Client funds being moved in ways that benefited Murdaugh rather than the clients. All of this should have triggered some level of scrutiny. Often it didn't because of who Murdaugh was. The other factor that allowed the crimes to continue was the vulnerability of Murdaugh's victims. People who are dealing with catastrophic injuries or the loss of loved ones are often not in a position to carefully scrutinize every detail of their legal case. They're focused on recovery or on grief. They rely on their attorney to handle the complex financial and legal aspects of their settlement. That reliance creates an opportunity for unethical attorneys to exploit, and Murdaugh exploited it systematically. What finally brought down the house of cards wasn't robust oversight or internal controls or regulatory scrutiny. It was a law firm's CFO noticing a check that looked unusual. One check out of hundreds that prompted questions. Those questions led to a review of other cases. That review revealed the pattern. And within days, Murdaugh's decade-long crime spree was exposed. If that one check hadn't been noticed, if it had been processed routinely like so many others, how much longer would the stealing have continued? Would it have continued until there were no more clients to steal from? Until the amounts became so large they couldn't be hidden? We'll never know. But the fact that it took so long to discover suggests that the systems designed to prevent this type of crime were inadequate. In the aftermath, reforms were implemented. Law firms in South Carolina and beyond reviewed their internal controls. Banks were reminded of their obligations to flag suspicious activity. Bar associations examined how they monitor attorney trust accounts. But these reforms came too late for Murdaugh's victims. They suffered not because of a failure of laws, but because of a failure of culture, a culture that allowed reputation to substitute for accountability and trust to substitute for verification. The financial crimes of Alex Murdaugh stand as a reminder that the most dangerous criminals are often not the ones society immediately recognizes as threats. They're the ones who look trustworthy, who seem successful, who come from respected families. They're the ones who use their position and reputation as camouflage. And they continue until someone finally asks the questions that should have been asked from the beginning. Alex Murdaugh is currently serving concurrent sentences that will keep him in prison for the rest of his life. The 40-year federal sentence for financial crimes runs at the same time as his state murder sentences, meaning in practical terms, he faces no additional time for stealing millions of dollars from vulnerable people. Some see this as justice delayed, but finally achieved. Others see it as fundamentally inadequate given the scope of his crimes. But perhaps the most important legacy of this case isn't about Murdaugh at all. It's about what his crimes reveal about systems and trust and accountability. It's about how easily those systems can be manipulated when reputation substitutes for oversight. It's about how trust, which is necessary for society to function, can be weaponized by those willing to exploit it. The financial crimes weren't a side story to the murders. They were the foundation. They created the pressures, the desperation, the circumstances that prosecutors argue led to the deaths of his wife and son. And they revealed who Alex Murdaugh really was. Not the respected attorney from the legendary family, but a man who saw other people's suffering as an opportunity for personal profit. As you think about this case, consider the questions it raises. How do we balance the need for trust in professional relationships with the need for verification and accountability? How do we create systems that protect the vulnerable without becoming so bureaucratic that they impede legitimate work? How do we recognize when someone's reputation has become a shield for misconduct? These aren't easy questions, but they're essential ones. The victims of Alex Murdaugh's financial crimes have shown remarkable courage in speaking out, in demanding accountability, in refusing to let these crimes be overshadowed by the murder case. Their voices matter. Their stories matter, and their insistence that financial crime is serious crime, that stealing from the vulnerable is a profound betrayal, is a truth we need to remember. If you found this deep dive valuable, If you believe in examining true crime through the lens of systems and accountability rather than just sensationalism, then subscribe to Dark Trail Files. Hit that notification bell. Share this video with others who care about understanding not just what happened, but why and how. Because only by understanding these patterns can we hope to prevent them from happening again. This is Dark Trail Files. Until next time,